What's up, Rovers? Welcome to patch 1.3, and welcome to the Black Shores, our previous home and the land where Shorekeeper, our newest Spectro Rectifier, hails from. In all her mysterious beauty, I can absolutely say Kuro cooked this update, and there is so much in store waiting for us. I've been working on this guide for about 50 hours, so please let me know if you liked it. As always, all explanations and testing is backed by math, and my spreadsheets will be listed in description and pinned for cross-referencing. As usual, let's go over today's plan. First are her roles in teams and main mechanics, then a deeper dive. Next comes Forte priorities, then echo discussion for sets, main stats and substats, then weapon options. Then we lead into endgame stat goals and a breakdown of our sequences. Lastly, we will look at our rotations and our teams fit together. Don't worry, this video is shorter not because Shorekeeper doesn't have much going on, but because she's busted and easy to use. So what exactly does Shorekeeper do? She oversees the happenings of Black Shore, which have long been shrouded in mystery. For the first time in years, it has revealed itself to the world once more. Shorekeeper herself retains a supportive role in gameplay as well, filling the same buffer healer archetype of Verina and Baijiu, focusing on massive buffs and little personal damage, that is, unless you open your wallet. She glides around effortlessly and teleports in battle with absolutely gorgeous animations. Holding down heavy lets you zoom around as a butterfly, a good way for mobility, but you can launch yourself a little bit. Now, if you've been looking for a premium support unit doing the job of a second Verina, Shorekeeper might just be for you. But how is she compared to Verina? Fast snappy rotations for Calcharo generation, including the fastest ones in the game at S3 being only 1.5 seconds long. Solid heals and many buffs to minimize stat dilution of her effects. For the typical player, she's built almost the exact same, except HP scaling instead of attack scaling. That means you can easily shift most of your hard-earned energy recharge elites to her as needed. But she also has some notable differences. While Verina has a coordinated attack liberation, Shorekeeper's liberation produces a massive field that passively buffs stats. Good for most teams, bad for Jinhsi comps, but that's okay, she didn't really need more buffs. Verina can also front-load her heal from her Forte bar, which can be produced quickly with dodge counters and skill, whereas Shorekeeper can only heal with her skill cast, which has a long cooldown, and her liberation field, which heals slowly over time. This makes Shorekeeper better at healing chip damage, but Verina better at healing large amounts of damage quickly. Finally, unlike Verina, Shorekeeper actually wants to perform her intro. Luckily, her intro hits like a truck. Expect an average S0 build to deal about 50 to 60k damage when she swaps in. If you go all the way to S6, she easily reaches nuke tier damage exceeding 500k. Yes, I said that right, 500,000 plus for her intro. For related reasons, Verina fits well in 2 and 3 unit teams, where Shorekeeper struggles to function properly in 2 unit teams. More on that later. And finally, yes, she does have an auto revive once every 10 minutes. So what if you just want a TLDR on her kits? Her skill is your instant team heal, about 4 to 6,000 HP on a typical finish build. Your liberation heals once every 3 seconds while it's active for 2,000 to 2,500. Those are the only good heals she has. Her other half of her kit revolves around casting her Liberation Stellar Realm for 30 seconds to give your team crit buffs when inside. It has 3 stages, the initial, and then +1 stage each time a Resonator casts intro skill while it's active. The outer blue, inner pink, and supernal gold Stellar Realm. Each stage also carries all the previous stage effects, so stage 1 grants you a 2000 to 2500 HP heal every 3 seconds. Stage 2 gives you up to 12.5% crit rate, reached at 250% total ER, and stage 3 gives you up to 25% crit damage, also reached at 250% ER. The rest of her kit functions in the background. Casting her intro when stage 3 field is active results in an absolutely tiny heal, but big screen-wide force crit HP scaling damage. If you don't meet this requirement, you get tiny damage. pull this off by casting her ult, intro to other characters, and come back to intro Shorekeeper. This is why she doesn't work well in 2-unit teams, not enough intros to get all her buffs and can't get her big PP damage. Her outro also brings good buffs, plus 15% final damage amp for 30 seconds, and you get 5 stacks of interrupt recover. If you get stunned or launched or juggled, you can press dodge to instantly recover into a perfect dodge for a counter hit. Finally, if you somehow die once every 10 minutes, Shorekeeper will burn 50% of her current HP to keep your unit alive. You also probably noticed I didn't really talk about her Forte bar, and that's actually because it isn't important, except just for charging Calcharo, which I'll explain in the deep dive. Okay, Forte priorities. This kind of varies, but you honestly don't need that much. I would recommend grabbing her inherent skills first for the auto revive for harder content if you're not confident. Self-gravitation is also a small buff that can replace the missing ER substat. What next do you want your Shorekeeper to do? Heals? Focus on resonance skill and liberation the most. Big damage? I wouldn't recommend going for this first, as it takes high investment to pass 50k, but roughly 80% of her damage output comes from her intro skill itself. That's about it. Her Forte circuit deals more damage than their basics, but neither are important as they both make up a tiny part of her DPS profile, and do not scale her buff sources. You can honestly even leave her Forte in basic tree at level 1. Luckily for big crit buffs, damage increase and auto revives are all tied to one and done nodes or do not require investment at all, such as her outro. Now time to take a look at her Forte circuit. Its main purpose will be for producing Calcharo to cast her outro and not much else. Her Forte bar is split into 5 segments, holding empirical data. You get empirical data from basic attacks, mid-air attacks, and dodge counters. All give only 1 stack, except basic attack 3 makes 2 stacks, which is when you make this giant purple ball. When her bar is full, using a grounded heavy pulls nearby enemies inward with a flashy giant butterfly. The suck is somewhat small but good for grouping small mobs. Using an aerial attack with a full bar instead will use the ordinary dive bomb, but it just deals slightly higher damage. Consuming her Forte bar will convert all present collapse cores into flare star butterflies that attack the enemy. Now these deal okay damage and their main purpose again is just for Calcharo. But how do you make collapse cores? Well, anything from the basic skill tree, being basic attacks, non-full Forte bar aerials and heavies, and dodge counters all produce collapse cores on hit. These hover around and turn into tiny homing missiles after 6 seconds. Or you consume your Forte bar to convert all at once, or you have more than 5 cores present, at which the oldest will transform into a missile early. Now these missile butterflies do nothing except deal a okay amount of damage plus Calcharo, and the full Forte bar attacks also do nothing except deal kind of low damage plus Calcharo. Now Shorekeeper's Resonance Liberation end loop is the bread and butter of her kit. You can only cast this once every 25 seconds, and it carries a hefty 175 resonance cost. Now this should be an issue because you want to build her for 240 plus ER to fully activate her crit buffs. Don't worry about the high cast cost. End loop creates a stellar realm that lasts 30 seconds with 3 states. It does not refresh duration with each state change, but does carry all effects of previous states. It begins in the blue, outer stellar realm. Each time you cast an intro, it upgrades to the inner purple and then supernal gold. Returning to Shorekeeper with an intro when it is already gold is what allows her to cast her big screen-wide DPS nuke. The blue state, outer stellar realm, grants you an HP scaling heal once every 3 seconds you're inside the field, usually ranging about 2000 to 2500 per proc on a full build. The purple state, inner stellar realm, grants up to 12.5% crit rate at 250 ER. For an easier way to do the math, just take your ER and multiply it by 0.05. That's it. The golden state, supernal stellar realm, grants crit damage instead, up to 25% at 250 ER. It's always double the crit rate you got, or other words, take your ER, multiply it by 0.1. That's it. Because Stellar Realm only lasts 30 seconds, Shorekeeper favors shorter rotations or quick swap teams that can cut down on time, and reduce the likelihood of missing Shorekeeper's intro for big damage. Casting her Liberation towards the end of her rotation gives you a little bit of extra leeway. Her skill can be cast in the air. It's a heal and Calcharo tool, and that's all it does. It's her strongest instant heal, giving about 5,000 to 6,000 heal a pop, but has a 16 seconds cooldown. Notably, while it lists 20 Concerto generation on cast, the special 5 dim star butterflies it creates will grant an additional unlisted 10 Concerto energy once they hit the target, granting 30 Concerto overall per cast. The basic attacks of Shorekeeper are to be avoided whenever possible because they do not grant or improve buffs, do not heal, and only stack Concerto in her Forte bar, whose sole purpose is also just to produce Concerto. If you can charge your bar in the moment without needing to basic, then you should skip them. A normal correct rotation will require one full basic attack chain if you do not have her sequence 3 do. Her S3 completely eliminates her need to use basic attacks at all, reducing her rotation from 5.5 seconds to 1.5 seconds. When her Forte bar is full, you should always cast her heavy attack if not S3. Heavy Idolation can be backswapped, unlike the aerial version of the full Forte bar move. Regardless, there are 2 rotation variants she can use I'll explain later. Now, Shorekeeper has 2 intro skill variants. Both give a tiny heal that you should not depend on. The normal intro skill, Enlightenment, deals very small skill damage and is attack scaling. The special intro, Discernment, forces crit as liberation damage and triggers when you intro skill while a gold Stella Realm, the Supernal Stella Realm, is currently active on the field. This requires you to produce 2 intros on the team after casting End Loop and then coming back to intro on Shorekeeper, all within 30 seconds. Discernment is HP scaling, has very high modifiers, and is her main source of DPS, dealing roughly 80% of her total damage output. Always aim to use her special intro. Shorekeeper's outro, Binary Butterfly, grants a 30 seconds buff for plus 15% final damage to your entire team, and 5 interrupt recover stacks. Every time you're stunned, launched, or juggled, dodging will instantly perform a perfect dodge and let you counterattack. Note that the recover stacks also only last 30 seconds. Shorekeeper's inherent skills are very simple. The first, Self-Gravitation, is basically 10% ER for herself whenever a Stella Realm is active, and any Resonator at all is inside it. It means you only have to build 240 ER to cap out her crit conversion buff. It also gives 10% ER to Rover if they're on the team, and is a small nod to Rover's home, which is really good because Havoc Rover sub DPS on the Hyper Burst, which I'll explain later, works with her. The second, Life Entwined, is an auto revive once every 10 minutes that burns 50% of Shorekeeper's current HP to heal your on-field unit when they hit 0, retaining all buffs, and it does not count as a death for challenges. For minor nodes, Shorekeeper carries a very simple 12% HP and 12% healing bonus to improve her supportive capabilities and intro skill DPS. Now, echo sets on her are quite straightforward. Normally, healers always run Rejuvenating Glow. In theory, Verina and Baijer can also run Moonlit set for stronger buffs if you're running only 2 units on a team instead of 3. This only works because Verina and Baijer do not require their own intro and can freely weave their moves in. They also do not require other units to intro to function. Shorekeeper, on the other hand, requires multiple intros to occur in the team to upgrade her Liberation for team-wide crit buffs, and also use her special intro for big damage. Without meeting these requirements, Shorekeeper's buffing capabilities and personal damage fall off severely. Therefore, Shorekeeper should not be used in 2-unit teams and should always be used on healer set to buff all 3 units on the team. For simplicity's sake, because I would not advise prioritizing damage on Shorekeeper, the standard build I recommend is using healing bonus % for cost. Only once you have proper Shorekeeper build and are confident with your gameplay and harder content would I ever recommend considering a crit damage for cost to boost her intro damage. Use as many ER main stats as needed to reach 240 ER, with the last 10% coming from her inherent skill. If you're not using her signature, I would recommend double ER, 3 costs. It will still take 3 ER substats to reach 250 ER with her inherent skill active off field. If you are using her signature, you can use HP ER 3 costs. This requires again 3 ER substats to reach 250 ER with her inherent skill active off field. These standardized builds maximize her buffing capabilities while maintaining the best heals available. Remember to use HP % 1 cost echoes. The reason why I don't focus on Shorekeeper's DPS, even while it's nice to have, it far pales in comparison to a proper sub DPS and main DPS. Now, if you do want a max DPS, I would only recommend doing this if you own her signature. You will pick crit damage double Spectro. This requires 5 times ER substats to reach 235 ER even with her inherent skill active. You give up a tiny bit of her buff, but she now hits for 75,000 instead of 50. Because this is only a 25,000 total damage increase across your entire team, and you get slightly worse heals and crit buffs, you really have to ask yourself if you want to grind for this. On the other hand, this works well at S6. Building her crit damage double Spectro at S6 makes her deal 250,000 damage on her special intro before any team buffs come into play. Note that the rotations I've spreadsheeted are compatible with both Bell and Fallacy of No Return. In theory, you can drop one ER substat roll for Fallacy, because I did not account for it granting 10% ER after cast. Fallacy is a summon but is much faster than Bell. It has a delayed slam that can be swap cancelled, and is HP scaling. It deals a couple thousand damage on a typical Shorekeeper build, which is better than Bell, but still doesn't really matter. And the main reason to use it is granting 10% ER to Shorekeeper and 10% attack to the entire team for the next 20 seconds. Because the buffs only last 20 seconds, it is recommended to cast Fallacy at the end of her rotation. Enjoy the JoJo punches, but do not use the hold version of this echo in hard content. Now, in contrast, Bell deals almost non-existent AoE Glacio damage on cast, but grants a 15-second shield for 3 hits with 50% damage reduction and 10% total damage increase for the entire team. In terms of pure DPS and survivability, Bell is indisputably superior to Fallacy as 10% attack cannot compete with 10% final damage and one-shot protection. However, Fallacy is just so cool, and the area and arena it comes from is absolutely amazing, but yes, I recommend Bell instead. Shorekeeper wants to be built for 240% ER if using Bell, or 230% ER if using Fallacy. Regardless, this typically requires 3 ER substats on your echoes. My standard build recommendation for signature are HP and ER 3-cost main stats, and everything else uses ER and ER 3-cost main stats. After you meet the ER requirements, the rest of your rolls should go into HP %, because this both improves her intro damage, heals, and survivability. Remaining rolls even after that go into crit damage for force crits on intro, otherwise liberation damage. Again, I would not advise chasing and rerolling crit damage substats for DPS unless you have nothing better to do or are swiping for her S6. The weapon situation for Shorekeeper is quite simple. She actually does not have much choices. The main requirements are the Rectifier must absolutely have energy recharge as a main stat, otherwise it makes it extremely hard to set up her crit buffs properly, which wants to 50% final ER. The only rectifiers that meet this condition are obviously her signature, Stellar Symphony, the gold purple standard 4-star variation, the craftable rectifier number 25, and a 3-star budget rectifier of Voyager. I also included Cosmic Ripples because I know people will ask about it, so let's get to it. Stellar Symphony. Now, this is not even a 20% damage increase over R1 variation, and refinements do not really scale well with any kind of weapon for her. Note that Shorekeeper makes up a very small amount of your team's total DPS. Therefore, unless you love her very much or are going all out S6, I would not recommend grabbing her signature just for damage. Stellar Symphony has 77% ER and a bonus 12% HP, compared to Variation's 51.4% ER and 0% bonus HP. Despite the seemingly big stat gap, this is what results in the 20% damage rotation gap, which is literally only 8,000 damage. Many DPS units deal more damage than that in a single hit. Despite being the only rectifier with bonus HP % passive, it only increases skill heal from 5,400 to 6,000, and only adds a few hundred to Stellar Realm's 2,000 HP heal once every 3 seconds. Therefore, Stellar Symphony is also not a great improvement for heals. Stellar Symphony also grants 8 Concerto when casting Liberation, which isn't that different from Variation granting 8 Concerto on skill, as both are cast at the end of Shorekeeper's rotation. Therefore, the only notable effect is plus 14% attack to team for 30 seconds when casting a resonant skill that heals. Verina cannot activate the attack % buff, by the way, if you put this on her, as unlike Baijer and Shorekeeper, Verina's resonant skill does not heal. But then again, for Shorekeeper, aesthetics and waifu over meta. Now, Rectifier number 25, a craftable, is the next ranked rectifier by DPS, but it's not even 1% better than Variation. And in fact, outside of DPS, it's strictly worse. Variation grants 8 Concerto on skill cast, which is required for Shorekeeper to have the effortless rotations she's known for. Without it, there's an awkward basic attack spam or dodge needed to fill her Concerto bar. Below S3, R1 variation is all you need to achieve everything Shorekeeper needs to do. At S3 and above, an R2 variation or an R2 Symphony is required to reap the best benefits of reducing her rotation to 1.5 seconds, otherwise it requires 2 extra basic attacks. Finally, the blue Rectifier Voyager is basically Variation Light Edition with less ER, no Calcharo bonuses, but super easy to get R5, and grants instead some bonus ult energy on skill cast. This should give it very consistent and easy liberation for starter accounts, but I would strongly recommend moving to Variation as soon as you get it. Now, Cosmic Ripples is listed for those that wonder if it would deal good damage. This chart proves its damage sucks, because 80% of Shorekeeper's damage comes from her enhanced intro, which is HP scaling and considered liberation damage, which Cosmic Ripples does not buff. Furthermore, despite its 12.8% ER passive, even on an ER 3 cost setup, it still requires 5 ER substats, and you will still only reach 225 ER. You would need both Fallacy and her inherent skill to get up to 245 for her crit buffs. In other words, no, Cosmic Ripples is a horrible choice on her, and literally everything is better except the blue Rectifier. Now, if you manage to achieve all we've discussed so far, then her endgame substats should look a little bit like this. Do keep in mind these are scaled to level 90, so it can take some time to reach this. Also keep in mind the amount of HP she'll have depends on what type of weapon and echo combination you're using on her. Alright, let's look at Shorekeeper's sequences. Note that she's a support unit, so most of these will not increase her DPS. With the exception of her S6, they function to make her job easier, so your team can DPS faster or grant bigger buffs to your teammates. If you want deeper detail, please check my spreadsheets, as I have a tab specifically for calculating the effects of each sequence and highlighted cells on how it impacts her kit. All math was done assuming R1 Stellar Symphony. Note that all values are quoted in vacuum and will be slightly diluted in full team comp rotations. Her S1 makes her stellar realm so big, you basically will never go outside it by accident. The default range is usually enough, but highly mobile enemies like Inferno Rider can run outside. The plus 10 seconds duration makes rotations a lot more generous at 40 seconds, fitting all teams easily. Special intro will also no longer cancel Stellar Realm, allowing for extra intros before needing to ult again and a more flexible team rotation. Otherwise, on good teams, S1 barely does anything. Her S2 is a big damage amp for your team, effectively a plus 40% attack buff for 30 seconds or permanent in a good team rotation. This is only a 2.5% damage increase on her since she's mostly HP scaling, but can bump up your carry unit by about 20% total damage overall. This is the first stopping point. Her S3 is the next stopping point and is kinda crazy. It makes her liberation grant 40 Calcharo instead of 20, completely replacing her basic attack chain, and compressing her 5.5 seconds rotation into just 1.5 seconds, of which almost all of it is spent in iframes. It cuts 4 seconds off the weakest part of the team, and makes it easier to upkeep everyone's buff timers. The 10% personal DPS loss is irrelevant compared to speeding up the entire team by 4 seconds. Now S4 is a heal buff only for her skill for an extra about 2,500 to 3,000 over the usual 5 to 6,000 heal. It does not affect the heal over time from her liberation. Her S5 is an improved suck. Nice to have, but really just a stepping stone to S6. Shorekeeper's S6 is a monstrosity, roughly triple to quadrupling her total damage output. On a heal percent HPER echo setup, this parses at about 180k in a vacuum. On a crit damage Spectro setup, this rates at 250k. These team buffs can easily elevate her special intro to 300 to 500k range. Alright, it's time to talk about Shorekeeper's rotations. There are two main options, with one preferred over the other. It all comes down to when you cast her skill. Casting at the top lets you jump to basic 2 and relies on the hold heavy to instant butterfly cancel into aerial transmutation for hyper armor during cast. However, this rotation has no moves that can be backswapped. The alternative and preferred rotation uses her full basic chain and casts the full Forte heavy Ilation. However, do note that you have less iframes and hyper armor and can get knocked out. While the second rotation doesn't have hyper armor, Ilation is a slow animation that can be freely backswapped to condense team rotations. Take your pick. Both work, but I use the skill at middle variant for this guide. You can cancel skill Chaos Theory with her liberation. End Loop has 0 end lag, and you can immediately cast Fallacy plus Outro to cancel the animation. Both rotations take about 5.5 seconds to execute at full speed. Because almost nothing on Shorekeeper's rotation can be backswapped, and her third basic is what gives +2 Forte segments. She's not really compatible for weaving her moves as a quick swap into other DPS rotations. 1.25 seconds of her rotation is the unskippable intro, and 2.5 seconds is devoted to running her basic chain, which is fast. The rest of her stuff, being Forte Heavy, her skill, and Echo, and Liberation are all already animation cancelled by herself. Backswapping Heavy Elation already cuts her true field time down to just 4.5 seconds at S0, which is on par with Verina. Now for the fun part, teams with Shorekeeper. I will preface this that you can put Shorekeeper literally anywhere you would slot Verina or Binder except in 2-unit team comps due to the mechanics of her special intro and liberation crit buffs. Otherwise, because of her 30 seconds base duration Stella realm, she heavily leans towards faster teams, which means quick swap or fast traditional teams that perform better with her than slow traditional teams, such as Chixia Changli or Havoc Rover main DPS being slow. All team variants can work with some cut corners but produce varying amounts of success. Remember that hard content usually fights back, and you will have to pace dodges or parries to survive. Note the current tier list refers to quick swap teams only unless otherwise noted. Shorekeeper is the first new support since launch that gives team-wide buffs rather than only to the next unit. Since quick swap and dual carries have finally taken off as best DPS, it only stands that Shorekeeper buffs these team comps the best. Regardless, you can put Shorekeeper anywhere you would slot Verina or Baicher except in 2-unit team comps like I said. She does not alter the rankings of pre-existing traditional swap teams. First up, Changli Yao. Perhaps the cleanest dual DPS quick swap of Wuwa, Changli Yao has taken off as the current top DPS parse in the game. This reason is twofold. One, it has competitive DPS to Changli Encore, which held the previous record, and two, it is arguably easier to perform, because Changli Yao is not restricted by tight liberation timer like Changli Encore, has much more AoE, and also has more hyper armor, as well as Changli's outro buffing the biggest hits of Yao, whereas Encore's damage is more spread out. Verina used to take the support role in this team, but it can benefit from Shorekeeper to approach 100% crit for more consistent DPS, plus bonus crit damage as well as solid chip damage from Shorekeeper herself. However, there's one key issue with Shorekeeper in Changli Yao teams. The reason it works so well with Verina is both Yao and Verina could funnel intros into Changli so she could manually charge her Forte faster. Shorekeeper requires her own intro for smooth rotations and improving damage. Not introing onto Shorekeeper wastes a lot of her kit and slows down her rotations. Furthermore, Shorekeeper is already slower than Verina, taxing the team heavily and trying to get Yao's third law of rains off within his 25 seconds duration if you also want him to be buffed by Changli's outro for his biggest hits. The final result is an extremely difficult but rewarding team to play. Personally, I actually would not recommend playing Changli Yao with Shorekeeper. Keep it simple and play it on Verina, but if you must, the team rotation is listed at the side. This variant also only works with 2-piece on Changli and Yao because of time constraints. It will run 120 ER and Changli at 110 to 115 ER. Shorekeeper should be running 230 to 240 as usual, like in all of these further showcases. Now, Encore is the next best option for quick swap comps. You have two options, Changli Encore or Sanhua Encore. Changli Encore has better AoE than Sanhua Encore, but is slightly harder to play. They're roughly equal played as quick swap. Changli Encore also has a hyper swap version that aims to condense Changli's entire rotation inside of Encore and Shorekeeper, which in theory can pass Changli Yao, but is hard to play and lacks the AoE and hyper armor that Changli Yao is known for. The standard quick swap Changli Encore rotation is shown on the left. Now on this kind of team, Encore only needs 100 ER, especially with how much resonance energy Shorekeeper produces. Changli still runs 120 ER. I would recommend putting one of the two fusion units on 5-piece lingering tunes, and the other on Molten Rift for rotation consistency. Changli benefits more from being the lingering tunes user here. Now for the Sanhua Encore team, the team rotation is once again listed on the left. Sanhua can run with just 100 ER, she produces way more than enough, especially because she should be on Moonlit set to buff Encore on outro. Now for the next team, it's very easy to play, Jinhsi Yinlin. It's straightforward and does not require much quick swapping. The most you will do is double cast Yinlin's skill during Shorekeeper's Heavy Annihilation move, which takes 85 frames or 1.42 seconds to cast. Otherwise, just follow the rotation on the left. Jinhsi should be Wuthering on 5-piece Spectro set with 130 ER. Yinlin can get by with a typical 120 to 125 ER. The team will deal more damage if Yinlin is on Moonlit set with Heron due to Jinhsi's scaling, but Void Thunder Mephis works too. Remember that you can Heron cancel Yinlin earlier in the rotation so that you don't have to wait for a Chameleon Cypher screen attack to finish and a Heron before swapping off. Shorekeeper and Yinlin can support Jinhsi to about 40 stacks consistently. Now you can make the same team, but replace Yinlin with Zhezhi. This results in lower damage overall due to slightly slower rotations and more awkward quick swaps. If anything, this is primarily a non-swap comp. Definitely run Zhezhi on Moonlit set if you do this, and make sure to Heron cancel. Jinhsi is still only 5-piece Spectro Wuthering at 120 to 130 ER. Zhezhi is on Moonlit set only with 115 to 120 ER. Again though, I wouldn't recommend Shorekeeper for Jinhsi teams due to loss of Verina's coordinated damage to charge incandescent stacks. Now, Shorekeeper can fit with Jiyan Mortefi too, and quite well, but note that it does not result in as high of a DPS gain as expected to compare to the other top teams, due to Mortefi's slower Calcharo charge. This is usually solved by double intro Mortefi or double intro Jiyan to speed things up, because Verina doesn't need intro. However, Shorekeeper does, and thus makes this team only marginally better instead of Verina. Mortefi still needs at least 140 ER as well as Jiyan. Mortefi should be on Moonlit set and Jiyan should be on Arrow set. Now Yao Calcharo. This team actually works quite well but has one fatal flaw, and it's Calcharo himself. Unlike the other teams, lack of hyper armor, super tight liberation time, and Shorekeeper's binary butterfly interrupt recovery. Dodges do not generate Forte stacks for Calcharo still. The damage is extremely high when played as quick swap with Yao and looks similar to my Verina Calcharo Yao video, but is very unforgiving. Additionally, playing this team as non-quick swap massively nerfs its damage per second. I would strongly recommend playing both of them on lingering tunes to reduce the headache, but it is possible to play both on Void Thunder Tempest Mephis. Yao will need 120 to 125 ER and Calcharo will need about 135 ER for this kind of team to be consistent. Now, last but certainly not least is Yao Yinlin. This team is very strong. In fact, all of those teams are within 20% total damage output with each other. You might be wondering, isn't this supposed to be one of Yao's best teams? Why is it at the bottom? Actually, it's just that Yao's long DPS window and being a sub-DPS Yinlin instead of a proper dual DPS quick swap like most of the teams I listed above, sidelines the team damage compared to the uber-fast rotations of, say, Changli or Sanhua plus Encore, or true dual DPS like Changli Yao, that also buff each other. Yinlin's short outro duration also makes it difficult to play Yao to his best. There's not that much to be gained by playing Yinlin quick swap here, but generally you will play Yao non-swap, and put Yinlin's double skill cast, again, inside of Shorekeeper's Heavy Annihilation. Yao should be on Lingering Tunes 5-piece for this one with 120 ER, and Yinlin should be on Moonlit at 120. Remember to Heron cancel Yinlin earlier in the rotation so you don't have to wait after a Chameleon Cypher screen hit before swapping off. Now remember, the tiering of teams that I've shown today is primarily focused on quick swaps this time because that is what Shorekeeper buffs best. These teams sit above the typical traditional single unit on field rotations. I did not include nor rate standard teams because you can run them the exact same as before, swapping Verina out for Shorekeeper. Havoc Rover at S2 also fits nicely in any team as a sub DPS with Shorekeeper, getting a free 10% ER from Shorekeeper's inherent skill. And also, like mentioned in my Yao video, you can easily fit her out of rotation skill cast literally anywhere. Rover should be on Havoc's at 5-piece with Dreamless at 130 ER. Thank you so much for watching through this entire video. I hope this Shorekeeper guide has been useful for deciding whether to pull on her banner. As a reminder, all spreadsheets documenting my testing can be found in description and pinned comment. Do feel free to make a copy if you want to change values and test stuff. Cheers! If this is your first time watching, feel free to leave a like or better yet subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Stick around if you want to see interesting videos. You don't want to miss out on any of that, do you? That'll be it for this video. Thank you all for watching and I'll see you all next time.